That's 10, Carla here with you for your Thursday, and we're talking about graduated licence schemes for new drivers this morning. I don't know if it's something that you think is a good idea. Thinking back to when I passed my driver's test, and it wasn't as long ago as you might think, in that I didn't actually take my lessons when I was 17. When I was able to, I took them when I was 28, because before that I was using buses and trains where I was working. It meant I could do that, and then I moved over to Blackpool, and for the job I needed a driver's licence. I couldn't get about without one. I felt daunted, I've got to say. Even after I'd passed my test, I felt daunted when I went out on the roads for the first time on my own. Was I ready? Really? Possibly not. The fact that I went down a one-way system the wrong way on Blackpool Promenade probably backs that theory, causing havoc. So I possibly could have done with a graduated licence scheme. So this is part of the AA's manifesto, and it talks about the suggestions include not allowing a young driver to have young passengers in the car for 6 months after they've passed their driving test, and restricting driving times as well for young drivers. Now, it seems that this is for under 25s, and there is some argument that new drivers of any age should fall into this category, because of course I was 28, so I actually wouldn't have qualified for this. Young drivers, new drivers, should they be considered in the same way? So you're going to hear now from Kevin Dias, who I've spoken to about this. He's from Wheelsby Driving School and is the chair of Grimsby Instructors Association. And I asked him first of all if young or new drivers are more prone to accidents than other drivers.
New drivers in general are, and that's regardless of age. Even people that leave learning to drive till later on in life are also prone to accidents due to inexperience. But for older drivers, regardless of them being new, they have sort of coping strategies. They're not likely to be quite as susceptible to peer pressure and trying to fit in the same way as younger drivers are. Younger drivers also are at risk because the part of the brain that deals with risk doesn't develop until you're around 24, 25 years of age, which puts them at more risk, as well as just in general a bit of a more risk-taking attitude as well.
Yeah, and I suppose the experience of having driven for a number of years helps as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously as they develop their driving skills and gain more experience, that risk is going to reduce, whereas for younger drivers, they first pass inexperience, plus their ability to identify and assess risk, plus the other things that form part of this, the trying to fit in, the peer pressure, and just optimism bias. We don't think that we're going to die when we're 17, 18, 19 years of age. Dying is for old people. So when we're out on the road, we bring that into our attitudes, and we don't think it'll happen to us.
Do you think then that 17 years old is too young for people to learn to drive?
It's such a tricky one because there's so many benefits to being able to drive. You've got employment benefits, the ability to get around, particularly in the area that we live in. We're living in Lincolnshire. The ability to get around relies really on having a car. The public transport system just isn't what it is in other areas. I wouldn't necessarily say that 17 is too young, because I think once they get into 18, they're into adulthood. There's probably more we could do to bridge that gap while they gain that inexperience, and help them with that.
And one of those ways would be potentially a graduated licence, which could restrict driving times or put limits on passengers that are allowed to travel with younger drivers. How do you think then that this would help? One
of the bigger things that's been looked at with this graduated driving licensing is the ability to carry passengers. But there's lots of other ways that this could work. It could be down to minimum training hours. It could be about limiting the engine size or the power output of the vehicle, particularly now we've got electric vehicles. It's not always about the size of the engine. It could be P-plates. It could be sort of a little bit more of a qualification based, really, where there's other things that form part of learning to drive, other than taking a theory test, taking a practical test, and then being able to get on your way. We do have a similar sort of thing to a graduated driving licence for motorcyclists in this country. Motorcyclists are limited in terms of the power output on the vehicle unless they're over the age of 24, in which case they can take a further test, which will give them direct access to be able to drive more powerful bikes. We could bring that into cars. I think one of the more shocking things that has happened most recently is that drivers can go and pass a car test, and tomorrow they can now go and tow a trailer as well. 2021, the government withdraw the need for that test to happen. And that's quite disturbing, and it's a bit of a step backwards when so much was done to try and bring that in and recognise that towing a trailer with an experience is also not good either.
Do you think that young people would stick to the restrictions if they were brought in?
I think it's quite a tricky one. I mean, if we look at sort of some of the other things that have been brought in, we've got black boxes that have come in from insurance companies. They limit and score based on short journeys being undertaken. They can also look at the times that those journeys are being undertaken, as well as measuring and looking at the way that the drivers are driving the vehicle. I think broadly people would stick to them, and when this is being looked at, there can look to be exceptions to how this might work, because you potentially are going to have 17, 18, 19-year-olds with children of their own, or they've got siblings that they want in the or they are going to carry in the vehicle. So it's about looking at how it's done.
Yeah, well, it's be interesting to see what happens here. I know the graduated licensing systems are in place in other countries currently, and there has been a reduction in deaths and serious injuries. And I know for those who have been involved in something like that, they would be, backing calls for this. And of course, parents who are watching their children learn to drive, I'm sure, hoping for a sort of risk assessment, which is a good way of putting it. I think the control measures in place for younger people. What's it like being a driving instructor, Kevin? I don't know. Is it hairy moments at times? Probably
when I first started. I mean, I've been teaching now for about 16 and a half years. I actually qualified when I was 22. So I was in that bracket of being an at-risk driver. What I do find is that most pupils make very, very similar mistakes, and you can see them coming with experience. They do make the same sort of things, and there's always a lead up. You start to recognise that they've maybe got themselves on the gas to try and get up a hill, so you know when they get up that hill they're going to slam the brakes on, or they're not going to be able to take it round the roundabout in the correct position. So for the most part, it's a really fun role. You get to really know the pupils and give them a life skill, but we also build up sort of friendships and a working relationship with these pupils. We don't want anything to happen to them either. And certainly the time that I've been teaching, and because I teach in Grimsby, it's not a big town, and I do end up seeing pupils that I've taught to drive years after. I mean, some of those earlier pupils from when I did first start, I still see out and about as well. The strangest thing is that they're now sort of getting married and having kids and things of their own, and I sort of think, gosh, you're really young to be doing that, because I still think of them as 17 and 18.
Really nice to chat to Kevin Dias from Wheelsby Driving School. He's the chair of the Grimsby Instructors Association as well. Talking about what life is like as a driving instructor there, but also about this graduated licence. Is it something that could work? He thinks it could. It could, not as a restriction, but if we look at it as a sort of control measure on people who have passed their test. But of course, the issue is the age thing. This is for under 25s, but should we see a difference between a young new driver and a new driver in general? Sarah says, I got my licence in New Zealand 25 years ago under a graduated licence scheme. I'm glad the UK is catching up. Yeah, I think we've already seen these systems in place in USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, Norway, Finland, France and Northern Ireland as well. And in those countries, they say there has been a reduction in deaths and serious injuries by between 20% and 40%. Heather says, graduated driving licence scheme sounds like a good idea. Age discrimination is not. It should apply to everyone for a period of time after passing, or don't do it. So again, we're talking there about this idea that it's for under 25s, but if you're a newer driver or a new driver, as I was at the age of 28, I wouldn't have qualified for it, although hand on heart, I think I probably could have done with it because I wasn't a confident driver. Get in touch with your thoughts. Do you think this could work? Let me know, carla@bbc.co.uk. You can text 81333, start your message RH. Check the weather for you after this. It's Queen, another one bites the dust.